Well, here we are at week 12's lecture. Glad to see you've come back for more. Last week we talked about team development, building high-performance project teams, managing virtual teams, and the possible pitfalls of project teams. This week we'll learn about outsourcing as a project manager. We've now made it to Chapter 12, Outsourcing, Managing Interorganizational Relations. Outsourcing, or hiring an individual or company to perform all or part of a project, is becoming more and more commonplace. There are several reasons why outsourcing all or part of a project makes sense. First, if you have low staffing levels, you may not have the sufficient staff to dedicate to a project. Your staff may be tied up in their day-to-day tasks and not have the bandwidth to take on additional responsibilities. Or your company may lack highly experienced staff necessary to perform the tasks. For instance, if the project involves streamlining a process and software knowledge is required, you may outsource the software piece while internally you focus on the process piece. Cash flow constraints are another reason you may choose to outsource. Cash flows can be an ongoing concern for businesses. As budgets shrink and competition grows, businesses often struggle to find money to fund projects. Thus, it may make sense to find vendors that offer their services on a per-project basis. Additionally, the company may have set up their business model such that they don't plan to do many projects. In this case, hiring internal staff for projects would not make sense. The organization I work for specializes in the development and delivery of training. Most of our work is outsourced to us by organizations who have their own internal training groups. However, their groups are often overworked and they don't have the bandwidth internally to take on additional projects. We also get other work from companies who have the organization model set up that way. These companies do not have internal training groups, but need to train their employees on anything from assembling machinery to soft skills. Let's take a look at the reclining chair project. In this example, the company is building a zero-gravity chair. All of the outside bubbles are skills necessary to design, develop, market, and sell the chair. Hiring these entities separately is more cost-effective and will require less time to accomplish than if the inventor tried to accomplish each of the tasks separately. After all, the inventor doesn't have the skills or expertise in the legal arena or the marketing arena, so outsourcing the tasks is beneficial. In the reclining chair example, we said it was beneficial for the inventor to outsource the parts of the project which they didn't have expertise in. Why would it matter if they had expertise or not? Well, the advantages for outsourcing those tasks would include cost reduction. The company could hire someone to do the work cheaper, especially if they can outsource offshore. It would also reduce overhead costs, since the company no longer has to internally maintain the services. Faster project completion. Competitive pricing means more resources for the dollar. In some cases, outsourcing allows you to hire 3 people to perform the work for the same cost as using one internal resource. Thus, you can get the project completed faster. High level of expertise. Outsourcing allows a company to continue focusing on their core competencies while hiring firms with the know-how to work on segments of the project. Companies are no longer required to keep up with technological advances, as they can outsource the parts of the project which require that expertise. Of course, outsourcing does have its disadvantages. Some examples of these would be coordination breakdowns. Coordinating the different businesses can be challenging, especially if the work requires close collaboration. Loss of control. The core team depends on other organizations to complete the work, yet they have no direct authority over them. Interpersonal conflict. The culture and values of the organizations may differ. This can lead to more interpersonal conflicts. In addition, gaining trust can be difficult when interactions are limited. Confidentiality is a concern, and companies need to be careful when outsourcing any work which includes sensitive data. Political hot potato. Foreign outsourcing of work is perceived as a major cause of underemployment, and U.S. companies are under increased pressure to keep jobs local. This is a list of best practices being used by firms that excel in project management. Best practices are often accepted as being the most effective or correct way of doing something, in this case, outsourcing. These best practices reflect the strategies used by organizations with extensive outsourcing experience. You'll notice that this list emphasizes all parties working together as partners, sharing the ultimate goal of a successful project. They are well-defined requirements and procedures, extensive training and team building activities, well-established conflict management processes in place, frequent review and status updates, co-location when needed, fair and incentive-laden contracts, and long-term outsourcing relationships. I mentioned on the previous slide that the list of best practices emphasizes working together as partners. This is a shift from the more traditional approach in outsourcing. The chart on this slide and the next provides a compare and contrast between the partnering approach and the traditional approach of outsourcing. Please review the chart. It is also located in your textbook on page 424. This slide is a continuation of the compare and contrast mentioned previously. Again, please spend some time reviewing the chart as you will be responsible for the material contained within it. If you have any questions or concerns as you review it, please don't hesitate to contact me. Once the organization has decided to utilize outsourcing, there are several activities which will set the stage for a successful partnering. First, you need to select your partner. Look for a partner who has experience, is willing to participate, and has a commitment from their top management. Who you select will have a major impact on how smooth the project will run and how successful the partnership will be. Now that the partner has been selected, you'll want to work on team building among the project managers. This helps to build a collaborative relationship between them and allows them to start developing trust with open communication. Finally, you'll want to introduce team building for the stakeholders as well. This expands the partnership commitment to include other key managers and specialists. Working together with another organization, even with the same goal in mind, a successful completion of the project, can be difficult. Communicating requirements can be especially difficult, even within your own organization. Here are some strategies for communicating with outsourced organizations, especially with those who are offshore. Strategy 1. Recognize the cultural differences. Realize that not everyone you work or communicate with shares your assumptions. What is obvious to you is not necessarily obvious to your partner. While those in the U.S. view a contract as legally binding, many in other parts of the world view it as merely a suggestion. Strategy 2. Choose the right words. For many outsourcers, English is still a foreign language. Your outsourcer might have a basic understanding of each of the words you speak, yet may not completely understand the meaning of the message you are trying to convey. Speak in a direct manner, using short sentences made of basic, simple words. Here's my own footnote. Please know your audience before you do this. While some may have issues with the English language, others may not. And those who don't may find it demeaning to be spoken to in such a way. It may be best to start your relationship with a verbal conversation to assess their command of the English language. You can then determine the best level to communicate with them. Also, be careful when using common English expressions which may not translate well or lose its meaning upon translation. An example would include being under the weather or twisting someone's arm. In the literal sense, these don't make sense. Strategy 3. Confirm your requirements. Be sure to 1. Document your requirements. Follow up any conversations in writing. 2. Insist your outsourcer redocument your requirements. If they can't relay to you what you explained to them, then they didn't understand. 3. Request a prototype. This is a safety net to be sure that your wants and needs are positively understood. And strategy 4. Set deadlines. Another important cultural difference relates to the schedule and deadlines. To most within the U.S., a deadline is a set completion date. In other cultures, a deadline is a suggestion that maybe something will be finished by that date. Be sure the definition you mean is clearly communicated and understood. Implementing the best practices and communication strategies does not happen on its own. Organizations need to prepare their people to work in such an environment. This includes training and team building activities. Organizations need to train their personnel to work effectively with people from other organizations and countries, and not just management, but all people at all levels who interact with and are dependent upon outsourcers. This training may be a general class on negotiation or a specific one, such as working with a particular culture. Interorganizational team building sessions can be held to forge healthy relationships before the project begins. These would involve the key players from the different firms. Firms often find it helpful to hire an outside consultant to design and facilitate the sessions. These consultants are well versed in interorganizational team building and can provide impartial perspectives to the workshop. The team building sessions often culminate with the creation of a partnering charter signed by all the participants. The charter states their common goals for the project as well as the procedures that will be used to achieve them. Here's a visual example of what a partnering charter looks like. You can see it lists the project goals along with the signatures of those involved in creating it. So you've selected your partner and completed several team building activities. It's now time to implement the project. The following activities will help to sustain a collaborative relationship among the parties. Try to establish a we as opposed to us and them attitude toward the project. Just as co-location can help build a project team with an internal project group, it can also be useful with outsourcing. I've been involved in co-location of outsourcing projects, which has worked very well. We had a group of programmers from the outsourcer sit in with our team during the course of the project. This gave us all direct access to the people we needed to be working with. It also helped to establish a we versus us or them, as we felt like one team. In addition, find ways that will ensure the relationship withstands problems and setbacks. Establish a formal method for problem resolution, work toward continuous improvement, develop a joint evaluation, and encourage persistent leadership. Here's an example of what a joint evaluation might look like. The goal of this survey is to assess the quality of working relations. The data can show the pulse of the project and identify issues that need to be addressed. Once the project has been implemented and completed successfully, there are activities which should be completed. You'll want to conduct a joint review of the accomplishments as well as the disappointments. The information documented here may prove useful in future projects, especially if you undergo another project using the same partner. Hold a celebration for all project participants. This provides an opportunity for the participants to feel valued by the organization and that their work was worth something. Be sure to also recognize special contributions. If someone went well above and beyond or solved a difficult problem which had been plaguing the team, be sure you acknowledge them. Not all partnerships are successful, even when all of the proactive steps we've discussed have been followed. Here's a look at some of the causes of partnering failures. They can fail when senior management fails to address the problems or doesn't empower their team members to solve problems. Just as in any relationship, if you don't address the problems and ignore them, hoping they'll go away, things usually get much worse. If cultural differences are not adequately dealt with and a common team culture fails to develop, the partnership is likely to fail. Assumptions get made, causing communication difficulties. Partnerships can fail when there is not a formal evaluation process in place to identify problems and opportunities at the operating level. They also need to have a method for assessing the current state of the partnering relationship. Being able to catch and identify problems or opportunities early in the process provides a chance to mitigate problems and capitalize on opportunities. If there's not an incentive for continuous improvement by contractors participating in the partnering relationship, the partnership may fail. The participants should be the first line of defense in recognizing any area where improvement can occur. If they feel as though they are not part of the team or don't have any skin in the game, the participants may not bring this to anyone's attention. On the other hand, if they are incented to do so, they very well may do something with the information. Establishing a long-term partnership can have many advantages. It can reduce administrative costs. This is true because the costs associated with bidding and selecting a contractor are eliminated. It allows for a more efficient utilization of resources. Contractors have a known forecast of work while owners are able to concentrate their workforce on daily tasks. It creates improved communication. The partners gain experience with each other and develop a common language and perspective. This reduces misunderstandings and enhances collaboration. It can lead to improved innovation. The partners are able to discuss innovation and associated risks in a far more open manner and share risks and rewards fairly. It can also lead to improved performance. Over time, partners become more familiar with each other's standards and expectations and are able to apply lessons learned from previous projects to current projects. Being able to effectively negotiate is critical to successful collaboration. Project managers must negotiate support and funding from top management. They must negotiate staff and technical input from functional managers. And they must negotiate prices and standards with vendors and suppliers. A firm understanding of the negotiation process, skills, and tactics is essential to project success. Many people think of negotiating as a competitive contest, with one person trying to win as much as they can for their side. However, project management is not a contest. The people working on the project are not enemies or competitors. They are allies and partners. Therefore, everyone is on the same side, our side. If conflicts arise and negotiations break down, the project comes to a halt. If that's the case, everyone loses. Everyone is bound by the success of the project. Finally, it's important that disagreements are resolved in a healthy manner. After all, everyone has to continue to work together. The principle of negotiations emphasizes developing win-win solutions while protecting yourself against those who would take advantage of you. It is based on 4 key points. The first point is, separate the people from the problem. Focus on the problem, not the other person during negotiations. Avoid personalizing the negotiation. Instead, try to keep the focus on the problem to be resolved. The second point is, focus on interests, not positions. The key is to focus on the interests behind your position, what you're trying to achieve, and separate these goals from your ego as best as you can. Ask why it will cost so much, or why it can't be done by a specific date. At the same time, explain the consequences of not meeting the deadline. Practicing the communication habit of seek first to understand, then to be understood is useful in this point. The third point is invent options for mutual gain. Once the interests have been identified, you can explore options for mutual gain. This requires collaborative brainstorming in which people work together to solve the problem in a way that will lead to a win-win scenario. The fourth and final point is, when possible, use objective criteria. When you can, you should insist on using external, objective criteria to settle disagreements. This helps to reduce the feeling of one party feeling slighted or taken advantage of, and helps to maintain a working team relationship. Occasionally, you will encounter someone who has a dominant win-lose attitude about life and will be difficult to deal with. This is true not only for negotiating as a project manager, but in life as well. Here are some strategies in dealing with these types of people. When the other person begins to push, don't push back. Instead, use your skills to step aside and turn that person's strength to your ends. When someone is adamant about their idea or suggestion, don't reject it or accept it. Treat it as a possible option and then look for the interests behind it. To find the interests, ask questions instead of making statements. Questions allow for the interests to surface and take away the opportunity for the opponent to attack you or your suggestions. You can also use silence. If your opponent provides you with an unreasonable demand, don't respond, just use silence. This requires them to break the silence by answering your question or coming up with a new idea. Finally, the best defense against unreasonable win-lose negotiators is to have a strong BATNA, or best alternative to a negotiated agreement. People try to reach an agreement to create something better than the result of not negotiating with that person. Therefore, a strong BATNA gives you the power to walk away and say, "No deal unless we work toward a win-win scenario." Way back in Chapter 4, we talked about defining a project. In addition to talking about completing a project on time and under budget, we talked about the importance of satisfying the customer, which is really the bottom line. Thus, it is imperative that project managers develop a positive working relationship with their customers. Negative news travels faster than good news, so when a customer is dissatisfied, it puts the company's reputation on the line. Customers are much more likely to share with others the negative experience than they are the positive experience. Therefore, the project manager needs to do more than just see the project through its life cycle, completing the project on time and under budget. They also, perhaps most importantly, need to manage the customer's expectations. Each customer will have their own perception as to what meeting their expectation means. It is up to the project manager to learn what that is for each customer, then act accordingly. Satisfaction isn't necessarily about meeting predefined objectives, although that is certainly part of it. It is the extent to which perceived performance or outcome exceeds expectations. Mathematically, this can be shown as the ratio between perceived performance and expected performance. When performance falls short of expectations, ratio is less than 1, the customer is dissatisfied. If the performance matches expectations, the ratio is equal to 1, the customer is satisfied. If the performance exceeds expectations, the ratio is greater than 1, the customer is very satisfied or even delighted. Given all of this, the project manager needs to be skilled at managing both customer expectations and perceptions. There are many ways for project managers to manage customer expectations. The list here is just a start. As you gain experience as a project manager, you will learn what works best for you, your organization, and your customers. Of course, your approach may differ with each customer. It is best to be proactive and address these up front and accept that it is an ongoing process throughout the life of a project. It is better to undersell a project than to oversell the project. Doing this sets you up to disappoint your customer. Their expectations of the project become lofty goals, which you may not be able to achieve. Another is to develop a well-defined project scope statement. We've talked about this one several times throughout the course. In addition to being a critical step for the project and its team, it's also a critical step in managing your customers' expectations. Here you will state what you will accomplish. Being clear about this in the beginning prevents disappointment in the future. You should always be transparent with your customers. Share with them significant problems and risks. Let them know you are aware of the issues and are taking every precaution to resolve them. In fact, the customer may have ideas or suggestions on dealing with them as well. Along those same lines, communication is key. Always keep everyone informed about the project's progress. Talk with the customer early in the project to set up status meetings and come to an agreement on what information will be included in the status report. Most usually include a budget update, milestones reached, upcoming milestones, and any issues or concerns regarding the project. This should be shared with all relevant parties. We touched on this one briefly already. Involve customers early in decisions about project development changes. After all, this is their project. They likely know more about what the final outcome should be than you do. Therefore, they may have some strong opinions regarding any changes that are made. If something happens in the project which causes problems in the relationship, be sure to handle it quickly, competently, and professionally. After all, the project is still ongoing, and you will need their help and support to get through it. Also, see above where we talked about negative experiences ruining a company's reputation. Remind your team that they need to speak with one voice. This means making sure each team member is aware of what information to share and with whom it should be shared. When the customer receives conflicting information, their confidence in the project team falls. And finally, be sure to speak the language of the customer. If the project is heavy in technology, but the customer is not a technical guru, avoid using technical terms. Think of times when you may have gone to the doctor and they've explained something to you. In some cases, you don't speak their language. I can think of several times when I've looked at the doctor and thought, okay, whatever that means. This is not how you want your customers to feel. You want them to walk away from a conversation with you knowing what is happening and why. We've spent this last half hour or so discussing how outsourcing has become an important component to project management. The advantages of outsourcing include cost reduction, quicker completion times, greater flexibility, and a higher level of expertise. On the other hand, the disadvantages include coordination problems, loss of control, conflicts, security issues, and political fallout. Fortunately, we also discussed some best practices for outsourcing. This can be used proactively to avoid some of the possible disadvantages. We also covered negotiating skills, managing difficult customers, and managing customer expectations, all essential in ensuring a satisfied customer upon project completion. Next week, we'll learn about progress and performance measurement and evaluation. Until then, don't forget to complete Quiz 5 by midnight on Sunday, November 15th. In addition, the discussion topics for the week have been posted. Please be sure you head over there to share your thoughts. As usual, if you have any questions or concerns regarding this chapter, or any of the course material, please don't hesitate to contact me. Have a great week.